Solara had always known a life of pain. On the alien planet she was born, she was seen as nothing more than an object. For years she had been forced to work in the cold, dark mines, her hands calloused and bleeding, her back bent under the weight of the world. The alien overlords who controlled the planet viewed her kind as expendable, as mere tools to be used and discarded when no longer needed. Her chains were heavy, but they were not the only thing that bound her. The fear, the feeling that she was less than others, that she was worthless, those were the things that truly kept her captive. Each day, Solara would wake up to the sound of the cruel overseers cracking their whips, the smell of burning metal, and the sight of other slaves toiling away, just like her. There was no escape, no hope. Solara's heart had grown tired. The long years of abuse had worn her down, leaving behind only a flicker of what once might have been a hopeful soul. She didn't even remember what it felt like to smile anymore. Her life was a blur of work, pain, and endless suffering. She had never known freedom. And then one day everything changed. It was just another day in the market, another day where Solara was treated like dirt. The slavers, her masters, had set her up in the marketplace to be sold to the highest bidder. She stood there in silence, her head lowered, her eyes fixed on the ground beneath her feet. She had long since stopped trying to speak up for herself, for she knew it was pointless. Her life had been reduced to this, standing on display for the amusement of the rich, being passed around from one cruel hand to another. As she stood there, feeling as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her chest, something caught her attention. A figure entered the market, someone different. He was tall, strong, and his eyes had an expression of kindness that felt foreign to her. Most people here were either indifferent or cruel. But this man, his gaze was full of something else, compassion. His name was Caleb, and he was a human. Humans were a rare sight on this planet. The alien overlords rarely interacted with them, as they didn't consider them a threat. But Caleb wasn't just any human. He was a warrior, a traveler, and someone who had seen the worst that the galaxy had to offer. He had come to this planet not as a conqueror, but as a learner, seeking knowledge and a way to make peace with the inhabitants. When Caleb saw Solara, something stirred deep within him. He had heard stories about the slaves, about the injustice they suffered. But seeing her in person, standing there in chains, her face blank and resigned, it broke his heart. He approached the slavers with determination in his steps. The overseers looked at him with suspicion, but Caleb's reputation had preceded him. He was known to have a strong sense of justice even among the cruelest worlds. How much for her? Caleb asked, his voice calm but firm. The slavers laughed. To them, Solara was just another piece of property, another slave to be sold off for the right price. They began to haggle, throwing out absurdly high numbers, not really caring about the woman they were bargaining over. They saw no value in her except the price they could get. But Caleb didn't back down. He was willing to pay whatever it took. He had heard the stories of the slaves on this planet, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of Solara, standing there in front of him, her body and spirit worn down by years of suffering. He could see the emptiness in her eyes, the way she had long ago given up on life. He offered them more than they could have dreamed for, and in the end, they accepted. With a few credits exchanged, Caleb had done what he came to do. He had freed her. The moment the chains were removed, Solara felt a rush of freedom like she had never known before. It wasn't just the physical weight that lifted from her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe, but her heart was still heavy with doubt. Could it be true? Could this human, this stranger, really have set her free? She looked up at Caleb, unsure of what to say or how to act. "You're free now," Caleb said gently, his voice soft, yet filled with certainty. "You don't have to be their slave anymore." Solara didn't know how to respond. Her entire life had been defined by chains, literal and metaphorical. Freedom was a strange, terrifying concept. She had been broken down to the point where she couldn't remember what it meant to be her own person. But as she stood there, staring at Caleb, she could see in his eyes a promise, one of hope, of kindness, something she had long since abandoned. For a brief moment, she let herself believe. Maybe, just maybe, this human was different. Maybe for once someone cared. But freedom wasn't going to be easy. The moment Caleb freed her, he knew he had made powerful enemies. The alien overlords didn't take kindly to anyone who threatened their power, and Solara's escape would not be tolerated. Their wrath would be swift and unforgiving. The slavers, furious at losing one of their most valuable properties, began to plot their next move. They wouldn't rest until they had her back under their control. Caleb, aware of the danger, knew that he couldn't protect her forever on this planet. They needed to leave, to escape the reach of those who had once held her captive. But Solara, still processing the shock of her newfound freedom, was torn. How could she trust anyone after all the pain she had endured? How could she possibly believe that she could live a different life, one where she wasn't constantly running, hiding, or looking over her shoulder? But Caleb was patient. He didn't push her. He understood that this would be a slow process, that Solara's healing would take time. Every day he showed her kindness, respect, and the freedom to choose. Slowly, Solara began to trust him. She learned what it meant to be human, to be free. And as the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Caleb wasn't just her savior. He was becoming her friend, her protector, someone who showed her that there was still good in the universe, someone who showed her that she wasn't alone anymore. But deep down, Solara knew that their journey wasn't over. The alien overlords were still out there, and they would come for her. They would stop at nothing to reclaim what they considered their property. As the two of them prepared to leave the planet, Solara's heart was filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Would Caleb be able to protect her? Could they truly escape the claws of the alien empire? For the first time in years, Solara dared to hope for something more, something better, and as she looked at Caleb, she felt a small spark of belief ignite inside her. Maybe, just maybe, this human would help her find the freedom she had been dreaming of for so long. The sun rose over the alien world, casting a soft golden glow on the rocky terrain. For Solara, it was the first morning she had ever woken up without the weight of chains or the constant fear of her masters looming over her. She took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs, feeling almost surreal after years of the cold, stifling atmosphere of the mines. She was free, but it felt like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved. Caleb, who had taken her to a quiet hideout far from the slavers, watched her carefully. He had given her space to adjust, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. She was afraid of what was to come, of what it meant to live a life without chains. He understood that kind of fear. He had lived through his own struggles, his own battles with self-doubt and pain, but he had learned something in his travels. Freedom was something worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Solara stood by the small fire they had made, her fingers nervously tugging at the hem of her simple tunic. Her thoughts raced, and she could feel the uncertainty crawling back into her heart. Could she truly live freely? Could she be something more than the slave the world had taught her to be? Caleb? She finally spoke, her voice soft as though she were still unsure of her place in the world. What now? What happens to me now that I'm free? Caleb smiled kindly, standing from his spot by the fire. Now you get to choose what happens next. You don't have to go back to being a slave. You can live your life however you want, Solara. She looked at him, her gaze filled with a mix of fear and confusion. I don't know how to live any other way. I've been told what to do my whole life. I've been treated like nothing, like a tool, not a person. I don't even know what it means to have a choice. Caleb's smile softened. He understood the weight of her words. Freedom wasn't just about physical escape, it was about the mind and the soul. He walked over to her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. It means, Caleb said softly, that you decide who you want to be. You decide what you want to do, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. Solara's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. She had cried so many times before, but this time the tears felt different. They weren't tears of pain, but of something new, hope. She was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could live a life beyond the dark shadows of her past. Over the next few days, Caleb taught her many things. He showed her how to defend herself, how to use a blaster, and how to read the stars in the sky. He took her on long walks where they talked about the world beyond the slaver's grasp, the endless, beautiful galaxy that was full of possibility. Slowly, Solara's confidence began to grow, though her fear of the past never completely disappeared. But as time passed, Caleb noticed something. Despite her growing strength, Solara was haunted by memories of the slavers. She would often wake in the middle of the night gasping for breath, her body trembling from nightmares. Caleb would comfort her, speaking to her softly until she calmed down, but he knew that there was no simple cure for the trauma she had suffered. It would take time. It would take patience. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Solara spoke again, this time with a new resolve. "I'm tired of hiding, Caleb. I don't want to live in fear anymore. I want to do something with my life. But I don't know where to start." Caleb smiled, proud of the strength she was beginning to show. "You've already started. You're choosing your path right now. And if you want, you can join me on my travels. I know many places where people are still in need of help. You're strong, Solara. You have a voice that the universe needs to hear." The thought of traveling with Caleb, of helping those in need, lit something inside Solara. She hadn't felt that spark of excitement in years. She had been so focused on surviving that she had forgotten what it was like to dream. She looked at Caleb, the man who had shown her kindness when no one else had, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. "All right," she said with a small, determined smile. "Let's do it. Let's make the universe a better place." But their newfound hope was soon tested. The alien overlords, infuriated by Caleb's defiance, began to send bounty hunters after them. They couldn't let a human free one of their slaves and get away with it. Caleb and Solara were now on the run with enemies at every turn. The first group of bounty hunters found them after a week of travel. They were ruthless mercenaries skilled in the art of tracking and combat. But Caleb was ready. He had trained for moments like this, and Solara, though scared, had learned quickly. Together, they fought back with everything they had. Solara's hands shook as she fired her blaster for the first time, but she didn't hesitate. She was fighting not just for herself, but for the freedom she had only just begun to understand. The battle was fierce, but in the end they emerged victorious. The bounty hunters were defeated, but the message was clear. The slavers would not stop until they had Solara back. That night, as they sat by their campfire, Solara couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. "They'll keep coming for me, won't they?" she asked quietly, her voice heavy with the realization. Caleb nodded, his expression serious. "They'll stop at nothing to get you back. But you're not alone anymore. As long as we're together, we'll keep fighting." Solara looked at him, feeling a sense of gratitude that she had never known before. She had always been alone, always fought to survive on her own. But now she had Caleb by her side. And she had something that she had never thought possible: freedom and the power to choose her own future. "Thank you, Caleb," she said softly, "for giving me a chance, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Caleb smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder once more. "You don't need to thank me. You've always had the strength inside you, Solara. I just helped you see it." As the days turned into weeks, Solara and Caleb traveled together, helping those they encountered along the way. They freed more slaves, fought against injustice, and slowly began to build a reputation across the galaxy. As champions of freedom, people started to look up to them, to see them as symbols of hope in a universe that often felt dark and cruel. But even as their victories grew, so did the danger. The alien overlords had not forgotten about them, and the bounty hunters kept coming. But with every fight, every escape, and every act of kindness they offered to others, Solara grew stronger, more confident. She was no longer the broken slave who had been sold in the market. She was a warrior, a protector, and most importantly, a free woman. And as the stars shone brightly above, Solara knew that no matter what came next, she was ready to face the challenges ahead, ready to fight for her freedom, and ready to help others who were still trapped in chains. With Caleb by her side, she believed there was nothing they couldn't do. Together they would keep fighting for a better tomorrow, a tomorrow where freedom, kindness, and justice ruled the galaxy.